nice to see you. Welcome. I hope you brought your questions with you. Welcome. Nice to see you. Oh, I hope you guys are having an amazing weekend wherever you are. Beautiful. Nice to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us. So, I thought I would hop on here and do a wee bit of a live because my post yesterday generated a huge amount of engagement and, more importantly, questions about how to heal the emotional abandonment wound. So I thought I would hop on here to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions about the healing of the abandonment wound so that hopefully more of us can actually move through this. So I would invite you to pop your questions up here. I've got a couple. I've got probably about 200 sitting in my on my stories, which of course I won't be able to get back to them all, but I have got a few here. So please put your questions up here and I will do my best to get through them. So first of all, I want to just talk about very briefly how the abandonment wound is actually formed. Well, actually I should back up slightly. I see more of the abandonment wound than anything else. And in fact, I would say that nearly every client I have worked with over the last sort of 6 years or so has an emotional abandonment or an abandonment wound. It's extremely common, and so as you know, I specialise in inner child work, so I've gone into the subconscious mind of just hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of people, and to the origins of abandonment wounds. So I've had a really incredible opportunity to see what exactly brings them about. So from what I have seen, the abandonment wound is usually, and when I say an abandonment wound and an emotional abandonment wound, whilst they're not exactly the same, they are very close. So they're usually brought about by in our very early years, and sometimes even in the womb. If we've had a narcissistic parent, a narcissistic mother, or a parent who carries a deep abandonment wound themselves, they never would have been able to connect with you fully while you were in the womb, and so you will have formed an abandonment wound from that time. I see that a lot when I do inner womb healings. So that may be the origin for you. And certainly in early childhood, if we have a parent who is either physically actually absent, of course that is going to cause an abandonment wound, or if they are emotionally unavailable. So that might be a parental figure who is just, is just too damn busy. They have got too many children, or they are working too many hours trying to just keep everything going, that they're just not able to spend the time with their children that the children need. It might be that they are sick, like for example they might be depressed, or they might have other illnesses that stops them from fully connecting with their children. Obviously alcoholism or substance abuse will also cause an abandonment wound. And if you've grown up, and I know a lot of you have in our community, if you've grown up in a environment where there's a narcissistic codependent type dynamic, I would say you would definitely have an abandonment wound sitting there as well, because both our codependents and our narcissists, I don't really like to label, but just for the sake of knowing that we're all talking about the same thing, both of them are actually emotionally unavailable and self-abandoning. Okay. So, signs of an abandonment wound look like somebody who doesn't like being alone or single. They will overattach really quickly in not just romantic relationships, but friendships too. They'll just kind of really overattach. They'll become very needy or panicky when the other person pulls away or just wants some space. We also have an abandonment wound can play out by causing us to put walls up or not let others in. And if somebody gets too close, it becomes really suffocating and they want to just pull right back. And some of you might have noticed that depending on the situation or the dynamic, that you may have, you might actually play both roles. I know I certainly have in the past, depending on the dynamic. So your natural way of being maybe, being quite needy in relationships, but if you happen to be partnered up with somebody or a friend or a partner who is also that particular style, you're likely to pull away when they become needy or getting too close and suffocating for you. So it's really interesting to watch that sort of happening. So probably the important things here is that this can be dissolved. Truly, we can dissolve the abandonment wound. We can actually dissolve any wound, actually. I have personally found that we need to go into the subconscious mind. And the reason for that is because that is where the wound resides. Now, there are some incredible modalities around, and I use lots of different tools myself. But in terms of dissolving inner child wounding or trauma, I believe we need to access the actual origin of the wound within your subconscious mind. Otherwise, we're only scratching the surface. Okay, and that might very well be why some of you who have been super committed to your healing journey, after 2 or 3 years, you're not actually getting the results. You're not really feeling those shifts like you should be. That is most likely going to be the reason you need to get deep enough. So I actually have free guided healings on YouTube to assist with this. And I also have a dissolving codependency course, which is super comprehensive, and absolutely the first up is healing the abandonment wound. Okay, so there are those resources available that will definitely take you into your subconscious mind to the origins. Okay, now any questions about that before I move on, guys? Cool. Okay, no worries. I will carry on then. Okay, so one of the questions we had is how can I avoid over-attaching in relationships? So it's not so much about avoiding over-attaching. If you're over-attaching in relationships and friendships, this indicates that you have an abandonment wound that is being triggered. So that is your signal that you need to go inward and heal that wound. Again, I have free guided healings for the abandonment wound on YouTube. So start there and expect to maybe have to use it. Might be 4, 5, maybe even 6 times, but each time you'll notice that the emotional charge actually reduces until it's down to nothing. Okay, once it's down to nothing, what you'll find is that you will, in those same situations, you'll notice that you would have ordinarily, over-attached, but you'll recognize that, I don't really feel like I have to do that this time. So that's how you know that that's healed. Oh, and something I wanted to mention too that a lot of people don't realise, that with each wound that we have, we also, there'll be a belief sitting there, or actually several I find. A belief like might be I'm always on my own, or I'm unwanted, or I'm always alone, or I'm alone in the world. We'll have those types of beliefs, and with every belief, it's really incredible, with every belief you will have a whole set of patterns. So for example, if you have a belief that I'm alone in the world, you are likely to have patterns where you might decide that you have to people please, or you have to deprioritize your needs so that they don't leave you alone. You'll do anything to make sure you're not left alone. And if that means completely self-abandoning, and over-giving, overdoing, overcompensating, then you'll do that, to keep them around. So that's why it's so critical that we dissolve those wounds at the actual origin, because then we collapse the patterns as well. Okay, I've got another question here. How can I stop attracting partners who can't love me the way I deserve? So the truth is, if you're attracting partners who don't love you the way that you deserve to be loved, then there's most likely a part of you that you're not loving as well. Okay, so something that I do personally when I'm working on these sort of, I guess, wounds or patterns or beliefs, I will call forward, I'll ask to see the part of me that feels like she doesn't deserve to be loved. And I will be able to connect with her that way, and then I will go through an inner child process with her. Has anyone else got any questions? What about when our children trigger us? Such a great question. Being a mum myself, I definitely, it's just like, oh my gosh, sometimes it's like, but so I hear you. So our children are often going to be mirroring back our own unhealed wounds, and certainly when they go through the developmental stages that we were when our particular wounds formed, it's going to trigger us. And what I have absolutely noticed, it's really interesting, as I said, most people I work with have an abandonment wound. What I've noticed is that if you have an abandonment wound and you're a parent, and say, for example, you are more inclined to be avoidant, so you're more inclined to put a wall up when people get too close, what happens is baby or the child, they sense that wall, and that causes them to panic because they feel like you're disconnecting from them. And the more you pull away from your child, the more your child is going to panic, and they're going to over attach, and they're going to want you even more. So it actually perpetuates the issue. So it's a really interesting one. So that's what's actually happening there. And the same goes for if you have an attachment style where you're tending to over attach. You might see your child preferring to be with the other parent, for example, as an actual rejection of you, but in actual fact they're just being a kid, and that's just what kids do. Sometimes you're flavour of the month and sometimes you're not, but you will take it as if, oh my god, I'm doing something wrong, they don't like me. You'll start to really question yourself as a mum or a dad. So that's what's happening there. Oh, great question. I'm so glad you asked. Is it normal to feel drained after doing my guided healing videos? Sometimes you feel so tired afterwards. What it actually is, it's such a great sign, believe it or not, because what happens when we have, when we're doing inner child work, basically our inner children, and we've got lots of them, like I don't know, I know why most people kind of talk about having one. We have sometimes hundreds of them. So our inner children, they have been, each inner child is attached to a particular wound. Say it's the abandonment wound. They have most likely been on absolute high alert, checking for threats that they're going to be abandoned. So they might have to do things like people pleasing, or being a really good girl or a good boy, or over delivering, or just deprioritizing their needs in favor of the others. These might be patterns that they have formed in order to not be abandoned again. So when we go in and heal them within a guided healing, like what I have online and what I do in my private sessions, our inner child can find that they might not have rested properly for like 3 or 4 decades, depending on how old you are. And so when you go in there and you connect with them, bring them home to where they belong, where you can look after them and love them and take care of them, they can finally stop playing out those patterns, and they feel safe enough to stop playing out those patterns as well, because they know that you're there looking after them and loving them and keeping them safe, regardless of what they do or don't do, so they can finally rest. And because you are the inner child, it's just that you got older, you got bigger, you are tired as well. And it's actually like exhaustion. Sometimes it's like, sometimes I might have to nap, like seriously, like 3 or 4 times a day when I'm doing this kind of work on myself, because you need to rest at those particular times to actually heal. So it's actually a great sign if you're feeling exhausted after doing those guided healings. Now that should only last usually It's usually in bursts, and it's usually only for a couple of days at the most, but that's why. Okay, and if you were to go in and check in on your inner child, like once you pop them into your heart, they'll most likely be asleep. If you check in sort of the next day, they'll still be sleeping most likely. But 3 or 4 days later, when you go in, they'll be awake. They might be playing, but they're awake, and you will have found that you're feeling more energized as well. It's really fascinating. Does it differ when you're adopted? Would the adopted wound look or matter? No, I'm adopted myself, so I know that I know the abandonment wound extremely well, and I don't believe that it looks any different, except it's potentially more intense. Certainly for me, I had a huge unwanted wound, and also along with the unwanted, will I have rejection, and of course, because mum's been carrying us that whole time, a lot of the time they're not wanting us, they're feeling a lot of shame. This is not everybody, of course, but that's likely to be the case. We have absorbed that, and so we will be carrying a lot of their shame and the rejection that they have felt towards themselves. So no, it's not necessarily going to look different, but it's likely to be more intense and very, very real. Okay, what about just not attracting the caliber of partners that we want? Well, if you're not attracting the caliber of partners that you're wanting, I would be looking at what parts of me, what are these people mirroring back in me? You know, yeah, what are these people mirroring back? Are they disrespecting me? Are they lying? Are they betraying me? If so, where am I not respecting me? You know, where am I doing these things to myself? So that's what I would be asking. Yes, naturally. Do you think parenting our children the way we speak to our inner child will help prevent our children from having abandonment wounds? Absolutely. And I do this all the time with my son. And I recommend this with clients that I work with that have children. When you're speaking with your children, I mean, I would be creating space for them every day, even if it's just 10 minutes. 10 minutes, that is their time. And I would, you make eye contact with them. Eye contact is really major, because if you've got an abandonment wound, there's every chance that your mum or your dad didn't actually connect with you fully through that eye contact. So when you're speaking with your child, I'd be saying, I see you. I hear you, and you use the words that they use. If they say, I feel really sad, then you say, I can see that you feel really sad. Tell me more about that. So use the words that they are using with you to mirror them back to them, because that way they know that they're being seen and they're being heard. And I can tell you now, from specialising in inner child work, one of the key issues is that our inner children, well, when we were children, we were just kind of like treated, you're a 5-year-old, what on earth would you know, kind of thing. And we've not been given a voice. We haven't had our feelings validated and mirrored back. So that's what's such an important part of dissolving that wound. So yes, absolutely. Speaking to your children like you would your inner children, amazing. What is a healthy partner type for someone with an abandonment wound? Yourself. Seriously, you do not want to be going into a relationship when you've got a great big abandonment wound. And most of us are. And that's one of the big reasons why we're not enjoying the relationships the way that we want to. The key is that you actually, even if you take a year out of dating, and you heal your abandonment wound. And the thing that I have found, when we have an abandonment wound, we will absolutely have, I find that most people have at least 4 to 6 major themes of wounding. But with an abandonment wound, we'll most likely have a not good enough wound, or a not worthy wound, or a not deserving wound. We'll have a rejection wound, maybe an unwanted, and that's all just sitting off the abandonment wound. All right. So the key is seriously, Take the time out and do that work. And even, and I know this, like, just so that you know, like, I'm pretty busy, so this isn't about trying to, tout for clientele or anything like that. But basically, sometimes part of our healing is actually investing in ourselves. Even if it's a smaller amount, we need to invest in ourselves, because part of the problem is that we will often have a low self-worth wound, and we're so used to devaluing ourselves or putting ourselves last that we find it really hard to put ourselves first and invest in ourselves. So that is often part of our actual healing. And when you do, you actually open up a energetic space to receive more. So I would suggest, if you've been knocking around trying to, heal your wounds on your own, firstly, I honour you for doing this work. But I would also suggest doing what you need to do to invest in a few sessions with somebody who you really resonate with, someone who will teach you how to do this work yourself. And then, do that for a couple of months, because boy, I tell you what, that can honestly move you forward lifetimes. What's the difference between abandonment wound and abandonment trauma? I would think it's the same thing. It's just different words. Okay. How do you shift from awareness of your abandonment wound to solid behaviour change? My self-work has made me very aware of my triggers and habits, but now frustrated with my behaviour as a result. I hear you. Because you see it, right? It's like, you just see it like a neon light. So you actually need to, understanding our wounds, doesn't matter if it's abandonment or not good enough or whatever it is, understanding it is great, but that's not going to make it go away. And there's not really a problem with, a lot of self-help books and so on, but we can be a walking encyclopedia about our wounds, but that's not going to make them go away, right? We actually need to get beneath the intellectual aspect and right down to the origin, which is in your subconscious. So my suggestion is, and I'm sure there's other resources out there too, but obviously I only know of my own, but I would absolutely be diving into those abandonment wound healings. I've got a couple up there actually. I would pick the more recent ones to do, because basically, in all honesty, the way that I work and the encoding within my practices has intensified significantly in the last year or so. So with the guided healings, I would choose something more recent. It's just going to be a little bit more powerful as a result. And yes, we do need to take responsibility. We do. Even, none of us asked to be wounded, right? None of us wanted to be like this. Well, at a soul level, actually, we probably did sign up for this, actually, but at a human level, no, none of us asked for it, but it is up to us to heal it. No one else is going to. Okay, what's my protocol for healing abandonment after my meditations? What would be next? I would be, honestly, the guided healings, they are very comprehensive, because what happens is, when we dissolve the abandonment wound and we dissolve the patterns, you're just going to find yourself not being inclined to want to people please or fix or whatever it is that you used to do. So the guided healings in themselves is, in all honestly, enough. And you'll know when you no longer need them, because you'll be no longer having that emotional charge that you did before. When you think about events that really triggered you previously, you'll be pretty neutral about it. There are things that we can do though, such as noticing when you are, like boundaries is a massive one, okay, but also boundaries for yourself, not just for other people, but boundaries for you. Like, when are you actually overgiving or not saying, or saying yes when you want to say no? So noticing your own boundaries and actually starting to honour them, and also putting boundaries in for others. Oops. Does it get easier to leave an emotionally unavailable partner to do work? Such a great question. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the same goes for anything. Like if you're in a really toxic situation, as you know, I specialise in narcissistic abuse recovery, so that's what I'll use as an example. If you're stuck in one of those relationships, where it's a very toxic dynamic, absolutely, when you dissolve those wounds that are keeping you there, such as an abandonment wound, the fear of not being with them or not having someone in your life, you will be able to step out of that relationship dynamic with actual ease. Because when they're fully dissolved, there's no emotional charge. You just actually leave. And in fact, sometimes you can start looking at different dynamics, even if it's with friendships, think, oh my God, what was I thinking? Because you don't have those distorted lenses anymore. So yes, I am. I would say, because we attract partners that share similar wounds to us. So as we heal our wounds, if they're not doing their work, if they're really not doing their work at a deep enough level, there is every chance that you are going to probably pull away. But please know though that by that point you will be ready to. It won't be hard for you to do that. It will be the thing that you want to do. So don't let that put you off either. I've been doing the work for about a year and it's still really hard to leave an unavailable partner. Does it get easier? There's probably other stuff going on, and as I think I mentioned right at the beginning, if you're genuinely doing the work and you're not getting the result, then I would say that you need to use a different approach. I'm being quite honest and upfront here, but when I'm working with somebody one-on-one to dissolve abandonment wound, because that's one of the biggest, we might at the most have to do maybe 3 sessions, but usually one maybe 2 sessions. So yeah, your investment, it's up there, but it's going to actually it's actually going to do the job, because you could spend years and years and years going around and around in circles and actually not dissolving this. So I would say you're probably not going deep enough. So perhaps start with my free stuff on YouTube and start there. But if you've got an abandonment wound, there'll also be most likely not good enough or a low self-worth or an not deserving as well, which needs to be dissolved, because that might be the areas that are keeping you stuck. It might not be the abandonment wound now. Yeah, but definitely go deeper. I've also got, as I mentioned, the dissolving codependency program, which is very, very deep, and it addresses all of those classic, abandonment wound, not good enough, low self-worth, guilt, boundaries, fixing, caretaking, all of those things that keep us stuck in those toxic dynamics. So once you go through that, you're unhooked and you can step out. Okay, righty ho. Oh, sorry, great question. My YouTube link, if you click the link in my bio, my YouTube link is just there. There's about 4 buttons. It's one of those. Okay. How can I stop listening to projections when I've set a boundary? So remove yourself would be my question. See, the thing is, I've noticed that boundaries, a lot of people say, oh, but I'm putting my boundaries in, they're just not listening to them, or they're not respecting them. So with a boundary, often we actually have to follow through. And that's the part where a lot of us go, we might not be ready to follow through, we might not want to follow through, and that is where we end up handing over our power. So if somebody is violating your boundary, crossing your boundary, not respecting your boundary, you then need to act on that. And that might mean either, removing yourself like temporarily, or it might mean removing yourself completely. So yeah, but you need to follow through on it. Why is it still important to me what an emotionally unavailable person thinks about me? This is holding me back a lot. So A lot of us who have abandonment wounds have, and especially if we relate or resonate with codependency, we've actually been taught that love and security and approval is all outside of us. It's outside of us. It's with our parents. We're not a good girl or a good boy unless our parents are happy with us. And often as children, especially, and I mean, it's just like, cringe, because I've done it myself with my son in the earlier days. Time out, quite often you'll send kids to time out, although we just got a hiding as well, I have to say. But when you're doing that, you're often actually taking your love away, so you're teaching the child that love can be given to them when they behave or they perform, and then love can be taken away just as easily. So that's probably why I would say that you've got programming sitting there that is telling you that you're not okay unless somebody else tells you you're okay, and also that somebody else is outside of you. They're not actually within you. So that's where we have got to come back to ourselves and looking at our own unhealed trauma, because there's actually more than we actually realise. And in all honesty, it's not to say we're bad or anything like that, but we do collect a lot of trauma along the way. Are they dissolved once and for all once you go deep, or do you always have to go back to ensure the neural pathways are solid? No, well, it depends, I guess, on how people do it. I know the work, I mean, I can only go so deep in a guided healing that I have online, because it obviously has to be quite general. But I know when I'm working with somebody one-on-one, we go unbelievably deep. We go very, very deep. And once it's dissolved, it's gone, because it's a pocket of energy. It's a pocket of energy that we literally dissolve, and it's removed from your whole energy field. You're welcome. Cool. So do we have any other questions, my loves? So I've probably been talking at you now for ages. Okay. Just having a look through here. How do we know when we've hit the root, especially when we're carrying generational abandonment on top of our own experiences? So the way I always know is, and what I do in my guided healings is we'll ask, think of a particular time where you felt really triggered by that particular wound, and you'll feel quite an emotional charge. Once we've finished the healing, in my guided healings online, as I said, you are most likely going to need to do them 4 or 5 times, and maybe more, maybe less. But when you go back in to find another time when you felt triggered, you'll remember the event, but you'll replay it in your mind, and you think, there's no emotional charge there. You'll feel neutral. So that's how you know when you've got to the root cause. You'll feel neutral. It no longer has any holding. Say, for example, if you were inclined to panic at the idea of your partner leaving or going out without you, doing stuff independently, if that causes you to panic, once that's actually dissolved, you'll find that you're fine. Like, you kind of don't care if they do or if you don't. You're kind of like looking forward to having that space to yourself. So that's what you're looking for. Just looking for any more questions. Beautiful. Okay, I think that's most of them. So guys, I'm thinking on my feet here, but I'm actually thinking of creating a membership group that's low cost to be part of, that we work together and I lead you through healings a couple of times a month and give you, practices that you can actually do at home, to actually help you guys get to the root of whatever it is that you're dealing with and actually dissolve it once and for all in your subconscious mind. Can you just leave a comment below this live and let me know whether you would be interested in something like that? Okay, my loves, I am going to. Oh, sorry, we've got one more. I left my partner who kept violating my boundaries, but I keep regretting that decision and feel like I'll never find anyone else. Why is it so hard to leave someone even when they keep hurting us? Because it's familiar. You've been raised in an environment where this feeling is familiar to you. That's why we need to go into your subconscious mind and dissolve it. We need to dissolve those patterns that keep you regretting and wanting to reach out. Okay, but that's what we need to do. Okay, my loves, look, thank you so much for being here today, but also just being here as part of the community, and for actually your interactions. It's really useful for everybody within the community to see your commenting and so on. So I just want to want you to know that I really appreciate you, and I am sending you so much love. Mwah.